and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris, and you're watching The Future is Female. This is the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. My guest today has co founded several social enterprises on poverty alleviation, and one of which has been called the Nasi Lemak Project. It was founded in 2012. It's been ongoing as a counter-poverty movement in Malaysia. And because of that, for her service, she has been awarded the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Award back in 2014. She's the first Asian ever to receive this award. She also received the Her World's Young Achiever of the Year in 2017. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today. Mastura Rashid is the Vice President of Impact Malaysia, which is an initiative under the purview of the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Mastura, welcome to the show. It's good of you to join me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mastura, so before we get into Impact Malaysia and all its different initiatives, I was wondering whether we could begin our conversation today by telling us a little bit about your journey and how the Nasi Lemak project came about. I'm so curious to know. I've read a little bit about it, but tell us a little bit more about this project.
Okay, so the Nasi Lemak project is a project that I founded when I was a university student back then in 2012. It initially started as a project to feed the homeless. Back then, it wasn't a big issue yet, but homelessness are often overlooked. So I used the issue of homelessness to advocate for people to volunteer impactfully. Back then, volunteerism is on the boom, but then people tend to volunteer once or twice, event based. I wanted to make a point that volunteerism needs to be impactful, needs to be long term, needs to make real change. And after we did things with the homeless for a while, we saw that homelessness is a symptom. The core problem is really poverty. So we moved to all segments of the society, from rural areas to places like PPRs. We did education work. We did we did free education. How to say, entrepreneurship. And actually I stopped doing the Nasi Lemak project in 2018 because me and my co-founders wanted to move to something beyond poverty. At that time we have been doing poverty alleviation for I don't know how many years.
Right.
So we stopped at 97 beneficiaries. We succeeded to exit 97 families from poverty, from earning below 1,005, and now they are earning more than 4,000.
Right. I really love what you said about impactful volunteerism. So tell me a little bit about that, about volunteering impactfully. You said that it has to be more than just kind of on an ad hoc basis. How do you ensure that this wonderful spirit of volunteerism, that people wanting to give their time and their efforts and their service in aid of a cause of other people, how do you make sure that there's an impact to that?
Okay, on volunteering impactfully, well, this is what I do in Impact Malaysia. What we are trying to preach is basically whatever things you do, whatever charitable things, good things you do, it must solve a social problem. So projects normally start with an idea, but that's the problem, because when you start with an idea, then you try to fit into a problem, it became non-impactful. So the right perspective on impactful volunteering is first to really study the problem. When we first started, we don't really just start with an idea. We talk to the people first. We find out what's the real problem. Then only we craft the idea. So and then I can define impact as three things. First, it must be long. It cannot be once or twice. Kalau once or twice tu, it might be on the outcome level only, but if you want to reach impact like beyond 5 years or so, do things that are months at least. And then it must be it must be deep means you really study and do problem solving. And third, again, as I said, it must be of scale. So the skill must be defined. Say, it doesn't matter that if you cannot reach hundreds and hundreds of people, but if you can serve maybe one family or 10 families, but you serve them long enough to make an impact, that's impactful volunteering.
Wonderful. And how, so you said that this is what you are doing with Impact Malaysia. Tell us about this initiative. What is the aim of it, and what are the things that you're currently rolling out now that you're overseeing?
Yeah. So Impact Malaysia is a part of Impact Integrated, a conglomerate under the purview of Kementerian Belia dan Sukan. So our mandate is to create more change makers. So previously, volunteerism is already culturalized. But then when people have the culture of volunteering, we see that there are not enough projects to cater to this much spirit, you see. So our mandate was to have more people becoming change makers, more people wanting to mobilize volunteers to do something very, very impactful. So what we do is we do capacity building. We teach how to design a project, how to analyze social problems, and also we have a very small fund to help them kickstart their project. So, and we focus mainly to community youth. So these are the youth who are not in institutions. So youth are not in universities, they are not grouped together, but they live, youth who live in one PPR, for example. So we focus on them because they at this time we have a gap of programming for this group of youth we call not in employment, education and training, NEET. So we focus on that one.
Can you give me an example? So, for instance, you said okay, so mobilizing youth communities who are not part of institutions, they try to perhaps create lasting change and impact for their communities. Can you give me an example? I love the example you said about youth in a PPR, for instance. What kind of programs would engage and mobilize them?
Okay. For example, we have groups, those kind of youth in communities. One group that left a lasting impression to me is a group of orang asli youth in Bilot, in Lurah Bilot in Raub. So these are orang asli. They wanted to better their communities, but then they don't know how. So they tried to they tried to engage the kementerian, the closest belia dan sukan punya pejabat, and then they wanted some training, but after a while, because normally trainings are given in a language that is not on their par. And one day we found them through some of our network, and then they joined our class on how to design a social project. So it is challenging for us to teach them how to design a project, mainly because most of them tak sampai darjah 6 pun, they don't know how to read and write properly. They can write their names, do simple writing, but with troubles like this, it's hard for them to understand design thinking. Thus, they gave a lasting impression to me because because we made an effort to lower the language, and they got it, and they are sustainable. They start berbalik je to their kampung. They started doing gotong royong, smaller projects like that, gotong royong, but then the gotong royong was measurable, impactful, as per one gotong royong can fit into a 3-ton lorry. So the impact is that if you do this weekly, a month you can you can recycle 12 tons of trash. So this is what I mean by change making in communities. If this is done by university students come and go. They don't leave impact. They leave outcome to one project, but because they don't live there, they don't really understand the problem of the community, they don't leave impact. So this impact youth below, I call them, they have been continuing on with some social enterprise ideas to sustain their activities. by doing agriculture also. So this is the case.
It's really wonderful to hear of how energized these youth are. Can I ask you, because again, I am trying to understand what your observations are from the ground, working with grassroots youth, and I guess the national sentiments that youth are disengaged, disenfranchised, they are perhaps apathetic to the outcomes of the country and their community because they feel like they're not being heard or seen. I want to ask you to debunk that, or to confirm that. What is it that you're seeing on the ground, and how do we overcome what is seen to be almost this national apathy among youth, or what is perceived to be national apathy among youth? Mastura.
Okay, so political apathy among youth is not just in Malaysia; it's all over the world. There are very many successful projects around the world. Macam in Canada, the one that left a lasting impression to me is a project back in Canada called "Apathy is Boring." So they managed to mobilize from 38% of voters in Canada in 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can Google up apathy is boring. But they managed to increase some 40+% to something to 70% youth who came out to vote.
Okay, Masra, can I ask you, is it political apathy, or because when you talk about young people being involved in community projects, does that have to do with politics? Does it have to do with political apathy and fatigue, or is it about they don't see politics as an avenue for change, that they see their own work and their volunteerism and their service as an avenue for change and betterment in their country?
Okay, faham. So, sorry, when you say apathy, I terus masuk dalam kotak, okay, political apathy.
That's true. Well, I do that too.
So, okay, the thing with apathy is if we all Google and cari and find this one report by Merdeka Center in 2021, July 2021, you can go just the website and download. It is interesting that at least 60% of youth are on for volunteering and for civic engagement. But more than 60% are politically apathetic. While politics really is about making a change in your community and towards change making, towards towards solving social problems. So from here, we see that most youth they like civic engagement. They like doing social projects, but they cannot advocate. They cannot see the link of doing social projects to policy making. They cannot see the link.
Right. How would you address that gap? Not being able to make that link. I have to admit that it's not an affliction that is just limited to young people. I think a lot of citizens and voters often, especially lately, don't see that impact, don't see that link, and therefore there is that apathy and fatigue that sets in.
So political, again, if we see the report by Merdeka Center, and also I have to commend my comrades from Undi 18 and Architects of Diversity, those behind Undi 100%, they did a report on youth aspirations. So the findings is that youth are not really apathetic, they're just tired of the same political situation. So I can conclude my observations and my readings on the report into three things. Number one, they don't see ownership and safe space in politics, because those in they don't see people like them in political arena, in political parties, or even in JKKK or JMB, those very local governance punya level. There's no, we don't see young people there. So when we don't see our kind in one structure, we don't feel safe. That's number one. Number two is really about the controversies, the issues on transparency, the culture itself. Young people nowadays, they are very, very I would say woke. They are they know they know what's right, what's wrong. They are a civil society by itself, thanks to the internet. So thus, when they see politicians are problematic, they are distrust. And thus they don't like politics, mainly because, oh, there are corrupt people inside there. I don't want to be corrupt. I don't want to join politics. And third, I think there's a misdefinition of politics. The politics that I understand, and most of my comrades who are in civil society understands, politics is about power that can drive social change. Politics is making a decision on, making a collective decision, and the decision should impact other people. But to them, when you say politics, it must be partisan, it must be political parties. So there are these days when we don't define politics. Young people tend to generalize politics as partisanship, and they got apathetic.
Wonderful. Mastura, we're going to take a quick break here on The Future's Female. We will be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to The Future's Female. I'm Melisa Idris and I'm speaking to Mastura Rashid. She is the Vice President of Impact Malaysia. It is an initiative under the purview of Ministry of Youth and Sports, and we're hearing all about the youth participation in civic engagement and in community programs. Mastura, I also understand that Impact Malaysia and the Body Shop joined forces recently to launch a youth empowerment program in politics, specifically called Kata Dua. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's fascinating, going back to what we said, we were talking about apathy among youth. How might this program, this Kata Dua program, address that, or make it more structured way to address that?
Okay, so as we discussed before, the problem with politics really is when it is not defined as what politics should be, and there is a mismatch between, youth have high appetite over volunteering, but youth has very low appetite for politics. So what Kata Dua is trying to do is to bridge both of them. Kata Dua is a long program actually, but it started with a series of camps called D Camp, D for Democracy. So D Camp is a 4-day camp. For the first 2 days, we do a simulation on politics, on the election in 1969. So we have to, it is done by our comrades in Architects of Diversity, 1969 punya election. And then the thing with Architects of Diversity is their approach. They try to re-engineer the society. So you will see Chinese becoming past, DAP, Malays, and then the rest of the party, all the world turned upside down. And what if they can change 1969? 1969 is the year of the riot, the racial riot. So in this 2 days exercise, they get to understand how a society starts and how voting, campaigning, etc. makes sense. And they also get some experiential gets experience in dealing with racism,
Right.
discrimination.
So all the social issues, so kind of addressing it at almost the individual level, right? So you're giving an opportunity to work out some of these issues at an individual level, at the youth participation level. I was very curious. What is it that you're hoping to achieve from this? An idea that perhaps youth can be more engaged? Is this part of the political literacy that people often talk about in preparing our young voters for the next elections and the future elections? Is this part of it?
Um, Well, I would say youth are well literate when it comes to politics. It is all in the school textbooks, but it has never been experiential to them. And it
Right.
was yeah. So the first 2 days they do they experience politics through simulation. The next 2 days they have to formulate a project on the issues that they experience during the simulation.
Experiencing politics. I really like that. Can I ask you, in your work, Mastura, and I know you are also an advocate for increasing women's representation in the political arena. Can I ask you if there are there's a gendered dimension, and there's a difference in terms of how young women view their participation in experiencing politics, as you said?
Okay, so here I would like to quote a research paper by Datuk Wan Aziza, Reflections from Malaysia. So that Datuk Wan Aziza apparently did a case study on women in politics years ago, 2002, and I can there are at least 5 factors that form obstacle to Malaysian women's active participation in politics, which is reflective to our experience in DCAM. Firstly, subliminal discrimination against women. So basically, some of them are experience discrimination, and because of that, even for example, they form parties, right? And sometimes where we see that sometimes the male leaders of the party in the simulation put women participants as, kau perempuan, kau buatlah minit mesyuarat, you see.
Yes,
So
that does happen.
So when we see that, we quickly we quickly change the situation a bit lah. And also of course time constraints and all. We did talk to some of the women participants. They said that, I have no time to be a leader. But then you are like the jentera, like the secretary and the bendahari. That's a lot more work than being a president, you know. So they quote time constraint, which is the same with Wan Aziza. A woman's place is at home, said Wan Aziza. The third factor is a woman's place is at home. So this one I experienced it. I observed it just last weekend. Last weekend we were in Kuala Terengganu for East Coast, for Zone East Coast. So there was a group of MPPs who came to me and said that because they are women and they are presidents, the student representative council president, they're being hounded by other students, harassed and being called words such as anjing, etc., which shows some very systemic patriarchy. So and then natural apathy and aversion to political involvement. This one, when Waliza said it, I saw it in Kata Dua. Most of the women or girls, they don't really want to participate, mainly because they are averse to it. Like, why should we speak up? We are not comfortable speaking up.
Right.
And lastly, resources, definitely. So resources, I don't see in Kata Dua, but I used to work in the women's rights movement, especially on the issue of women political representation. So resources are needed to make women leaders, women to be leaders. So example, in orang asli communities, it's hard to get orang asli women to be leaders, mainly because they need resources to take care of their children, their own their livelihood, to be leaders. But men doesn't have to. So patriarchy itself is the issue, you see. So yeah, that's my observation.
Yeah, I mean, I really like how you took kind of what Wan Aziza has written in this paper, and you kind of backed it up with what you've been observing on the ground. Mastura, very quickly, we've got a minute left, and I just want to, what would you like people to know if they're listening today? What can people do to help I guess, encourage young people to participate in civil society, or in civic engagement, or in volunteerism, or even in political participation? What would you like the message to be tonight?
Well, I have two messages. Number one, if you're curious about whatever I'm talking about, please go to www.kata2.com for more information. If you are interested to host Kata 2 D camp in your place, we are open to come to you and do this, because this is what we do. And secondly, for young people out there, please, if you agree with me on why you don't want to be in politics but you like volunteering, I would say just do what you can, because once you start being an impactful volunteer, you will, after three months or 1 year, you will see the importance of being leaders in your own community. Because when you have power, then only policies will change, then only the community will change.
Mastura, I think we can talk for another hour or so, but let's continue this conversation another day. I want to thank you for joining me on the show tonight. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. That was my conversation with Mastura Rashid, Vice President of Impact Malaysia. I'm Melisa Idris, and I will be back with you same time next week for another episode of The Future's Female. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.